Hi, I'm Joseph Donahue, and I'm a partner here at Block, O'Toole & Murphy. This is a case involving a woman who was on her way to work on a dark and rainy night in New York City when she was struck by a truck that was making a right-hand turn onto a roadway where she had the right-of-way. At the time of our accident, our client was walking to work. It was dark out, it was raining, and she was traveling the path that she normally took to get to her job. She got to the corner of 34th Street and 11th Avenue, and she stood on the corner and she waited for the light to turn in her favor so she would have the right-of-way to cross the street. The light turned, she received a walk signal, and she looked to her left to make sure no traffic was coming. She looked to her right to make sure no traffic was coming. And when she saw that it was clear to go, she began to cross the street. Unfortunately, when she was about 10 feet into the roadway, in the crosswalk, she all of a sudden heard an engine. She looked to her left, and there was a truck. But it was too late. She didn't even have time to react, and she was struck by the truck as it made a right-hand turn onto 11th Avenue. All turning vehicles, especially large vehicles, pose a great hazard at intersections, especially here in New York City. In New York City, there's a lot going on. There's pedestrians, there's vehicles, there's bright lights in big buildings, and drivers are frequently distracted by all that's going on around them. In addition, when a vehicle in New York City is making a right-hand turn, while they might have the right-of-way to proceed straight through the intersection, they are required to yield to pedestrians that are to their left or their right, who are also walking across the roadway with a walk signal. And that's precisely what happened here. The vehicle that struck our client was actually traveling in the same direction, eastbound on 34th Street. And despite the fact that the truck also had a green light, the truck was going to make a right-hand turn onto 11th Avenue, the same roadway that our client was crossing with a walk signal. So both the defendant driver and our client had the right to proceed in the direction they were going. However, the truck had the responsibility to yield to our client because our client was a lawful pedestrian crossing the street, and he failed to do so. In fact, given the circumstances, it was dark and it was raining, he testified that he did not even see her and was only flagged down further down the roadway after he had struck her by a Good Samaritan who saw the accident happen. Unfortunately, our client suffered catastrophic injuries. She suffered fractures to her lower extremities, and as a young woman, these injuries were going to affect her for the rest of her life. She had to undergo surgery to repair the fractures, and even though the surgery repaired the broken bones, it did not repair the pain and the suffering that she was going to endure for the rest of her life. Fortunately, we were able to prove that the defendant was responsible for the accident. We made a motion for summary judgment, which is a motion where we asked the court to find the defendant responsible as a matter of law given the undisputed facts of the case. And the undisputed facts were that our client was in a crosswalk with a walk signal when the defendant failed to yield to her. We were able to convince the court that the defendant was 100% responsible for the accident, despite the fact that the defendant attempted to argue that our client bore responsibility because she was looking down as she crossed the roadway. In response to that, we simply argued once she looked to her left and looked to her right, ensured that there was no vehicles coming, and had the right-of-way, it would be natural for someone to look down in the roadway to see where it is they were walking, and the court agreed with us and found the defendant responsible. During the handling of the case, again, we were able to prove that the defendant was 100% responsible, and interest began to accrue at a rate of 9% per year to any judgment that we would enter that came from a verdict in the case. We were able to use that fact in order to secure a settlement for our client for the entire policy limits that the truck had available. If you're a pedestrian and unfortunately are the victim of an accident where you're struck by a vehicle, it's important that you obtain legal representation immediately. It is vital for the attorneys that you hire to collect all the evidence that's available to them. That may be photographs, surveillance video, or even things like damage to the vehicle that hits you. Here at Block, O'Toole & Murphy, we are frequently retained by people who are victims of pedestrian knockdowns. Please feel free to contact the trial attorneys at Block, O'Toole & Murphy to discuss what legal options and legal rights you have if you are an unfortunate victim of a pedestrian knockdown.